He's the general manager of the New York Football Giants. That is the one and only Joe Schoen. Joe, how are you, man? How's everything going?
I'm great. Yeah, so far so good. We started with our interviews last night, so got off to a good start, and then we got a lot more to do today. So we're off to a good start, though.
How much are you working free agency while you're out here too?
A lot. So a lot of the agents will, typically show up today through Friday or Saturday, and it's really our own free agents, our own UFAs. That's who we're going to be meeting with. We'll talk with some of the agents that have college prospects at well, whether it's setting up pro days or dinners or private workouts potentially with prospects. So interaction with the agents is a big part of this as well.
Joe, generic question about the Combine. Some coaches don't come, others do. Some bring a full staff, some don't. Did you discuss with Brian how you guys wanted to do this, and what did you finally come up with?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I believe I said it before that, just the Dave's and his staff, their investment in the process, the draft process, the player acquisition process, whether it's free agency or the draft or waiver wire claims in season. I really appreciate that. So we work very well with the staff, our personnel department, and the coaching staff. So we have a lot of belief in our process in terms of, however we're going to acquire the player, the work that we put in, whether it's character, football background, their ability, the film study, whatever it may be. It's really a collaborative process. So I really appreciate Dave's and his staff, and there was really no discussion about them not coming to the Combine. Several of the coaches went with us to the Senior Bowl. And again, that's just, we believe in our process, and I appreciate Dave's and his staff for the work that they do with us, and Dave's and I are aligned in the thought as we approach each year in the personnel calendar, the coach's input along with the personnel will usually lead us to the best decisions.
All right, Joe, we got a bunch of questions from fans here. They're coming in via YouTube chat. Put your chats up. Pearson's back in the shop. He's going to get them up for us. We got Twitter questions I pulled. Then we're going to do live phone calls as well. So let's start with the Twitter question here, Joe, because I thought this was a good one from Jesse Deutsch. Last year, you guys drafted probably two guys people will consider a little bit smaller on Cordell Flott in terms of weight, and then Wandale Robinson in terms of height. How does size play into your evaluation of prospects? Is it dependent on position? How do you view that?
Yeah, we'll look at that. We take everything into account, football character, personal character, height, weight, speed, all that stuff, production. And if they don't have, again, I come from the Parcells mold, if they don't look like what's playing in the league, what's their compensating factor? And you look at Dayball's offenses that he's used throughout his career, all the way back to Wes Welker, Edelman, Beasley, and Buffalo. Wandale was the guy that was explosive, was really coming on before he was injured. And then Flott, again, he's youngest player on the team, good athlete. You saw him make some plays down the stretch in the playoffs, and he's got a bright future for us. Again, he's young. He's 20. I believe he just turned 21. So we take all those into account, but can they compensate for whatever they may be lacking?
It's almost like the fan knew your answer to the question, because I have a good follow-up from Twitter earlier. I was going to ask as the second question, is there a hesitation in drafting, this from Frank Buffone, in drafting a smaller wide receiver with Robinson on the roster? You tell me, do you see him as a slot only? And then how do you decide who is a slot only guy when you look at your offense?
Yeah, and Dave's and I talk about this a lot, and we actually went through some of the receivers, the Tyreek Hills of the world. Like, he's not a slot only. He's not a tall guy.
Right.
He's not a big guy. But they come in all different shapes and sizes. So if you're explosive like Tyreek Hill and you can play outside and inside, again, we just don't want to put everybody in one bucket just because they lack height. If they've got speed and they got separation skills, then in our offense, that gives them more versatility in terms of game planning and how we're going to utilize them.
So what do you look for a guy to be able to play outside, maybe if they're not 6'3", 6'4"?
Yeah, again, it's the ability, speed.
It's speed,
stretch the field, but then you got to be able to separate. All quarterbacks will tell you, like the whole big possession receiver with catch radius, like any quarterback, your comfort level is going to be throwing to receiver that has some separation.
Well, guys that are open.
You've got a bigger window that's open, yeah. So if you can separate, that's one of the main critical, obviously catching the ball, but that's a big-time critical factor for us when evaluating receivers.
Another question we had come in earlier, and I think it's kind of one I have myself. How do you put the final player grade on the board? How much of the Combine is the weighted part? How much of the Pro Day is the weighted part? And how much is their season's worth of film or 2 seasons worth of film a weighted part?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we just finished up our draft meetings, basically 2 weeks of basically 7 in the morning till 7 at night. We'll go through by position, and it's strictly a football grade and a character grade that we get from the schools, from all of our scouts work throughout the fall. So that February board is very important to me because that's based off of football only.
Right.
That's before we get to gymnastics. Oh, this guy ran way faster than we thought. Oh, he's slower than we thought, but he compensates with instinct. So to me, the board in February, we take a picture of it. We always reflect back to it, even in April. Hey, why did this guy go up 2 rounds or down 2 rounds? That's going to send off a red flag for us. Are we moving him for the right reason, or is it because he ran fast in shorts and T-shirts? So the football grade is the most important, and that's why February meetings, I think, are some of the most important meetings that we'll have throughout the process.
From your experience being in Buffalo and other places, how much variance will usually occur with a player from the time that football grade comes in to the time the draft finally happens?
Yeah, there won't be a lot. Again, we almost have a flag if a guy moves 2 rounds,
right?
And it kind of alerts us, and then we'll have a conversation. Here's what we said in February. Here's what we're saying now. Does this make sense? Or what did we find out? Are we moving him for the right reason? And does it check all the boxes along the way? So we have a checks and balances on that, and some players do go up or down. Some guys are too low on them, some guys are too high, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But ultimately what matters, you got to be right once, and that's when you turn the card in.
All right, let's go to some phone calls here. Let's go to our fans. They have them on the line. Let's go to Ryan in New York. We'll take his call first. Ryan, you go with Joe Schoen. Remember, we're going to do one question here, folks. Get to it quickly. We want to get as many people in as we can. Ryan, go ahead.
Hey, Joe.
Ryan, you got to get off your speakerphone, dude. One more shot or we're going to Taylor.
Yeah, all good. Hey, Joe, what do you look for when you're doing contract negotiations as a sports agent, with the agent?
He wants to know, what do you look for in contract negotiations when you and how you deal with agents when you try to negotiate these contracts? What's important to you?
Yeah, first off is the value. I think it's important to get the value right. So a lot of times our process is, who are similar contracts that, in similar players. So you'll look at age, you'll look at production, our pro grades, what type of grades do we have on the players. And then that's kind of where we'll come with kind of a sweet spot of, hey, this guy ranges between, dollar amount X and Z. That's where we see him. Come up with a contract structure, and then you go to the agents, and that's when the negotiations start. And again, within that, we go with a walkaway point. Like, when is this too rich for us and the value doesn't meet what we're not going to get return on our investment, and you got to be okay walking away. And, we do that with all of our negotiations because, last thing you want to do is overpay, and you're overpaying and you don't get a return on your investment.
All right, let's go to another call. Jake, you throw those on. You can actually hear the call if you want to put those on, which was my fault.
Idea.
Let's go to Taylor in Florida. Taylor, you're up next with Giants General Manager Joe Schoen. Go ahead.
Hey, guys, quick question. If someone like Bijan Robinson is there at 25, or even if he's sitting there maybe at like 17, would you guys possibly pick him there or possibly move up and get like a top third for him as well?
Yeah, we're going to be open to anything. That's a good question. Again, we have a lot of pending free agents. Obviously, Saquon, we're in conversations with him, so a little bit depends on that. But he's a really talented football player, and again, we're in a position where we really can't draft on need. We need to continue to add good football players across the board, and you're never going to go wrong adding good football players, especially explosive players on offense.
We have another running back question from Eddie in Virginia, so I'll bring him in. We'll try to stay on the theme. Eddie, what's going on? Go ahead. Eddie hung up. Looks like. All right, Paul, you got a question on YouTube for me?
Yeah, John from YouTube says, what are your thoughts about Hyatt, the Tennessee receiver, and the wide receiver class, obviously understanding your wide receiver room was badly banged up last year?
Yeah, with I would say the wide receiver class in general, it's a pretty diverse class. They come in different sizes and shapes and speeds. And again, returner, that's something we'll probably look at this offseason. So if they give a little bit of value in terms of returning and the versatility. But Jalen Hyatt's a guy that I was able to see live, against Alabama, which was a good game for him. That was a little bit of his coming out party. So good player, good class in general. Excited to get around some of these guys this week, meet with them in person, and see them move around on the field.
From Twitter, Jason Honeywell, this is a two-parter with two different questions, Joe. How do you balance short-term success with long-term goals as you navigate the offseason? And then another question that's related from Nemesis Oscosio. Could there be a conflict in decisions that could help make the team better in 2023, but maybe hurt the long-term goal of winning a Super Bowl?
Yeah, those are both great questions, and that's a little bit what keeps me up at night because again when we got here, again,
you look well rested.
The salary cap wasn't in a great situation, and we were trying to add talent. We couldn't really do a lot in free agency last year, so we had a really good season. Dave's and his staff did an amazing job. We tried to fill as many holes as we could with the resources we have, but also understanding, we still have a ways to go, and there's several holes on the team that we need to fill, and we need to continue to upgrade not only our frontline guys but our depth. So yes, 2023 is important. You never want to regress. You want to compete and do the best you can year in, year out. So balancing that versus, what's best long-term in 2024, 2025 as you continue to build the team and the foundation for us moving forward.
Just to follow up on that, Joe, has this whole process almost sped up for you a little bit? Last year it was so good. You win a playoff game, you go again. I'm sure you had plans for all different scenarios, but I'm sure in some ways you were preparing, all right, maybe this could be a really big, rebuilding offseason, but now it's really not that. Have things almost accelerated in how you want to build this team a little bit based on maybe what you thought it would be when you got here?
Yeah, to a point. Again, we always want to be competitive, and I said that for my opening press conference. Compete today, build for tomorrow, and we're still in that mold. Like we still want to be a competitive roster in 2023, and that's the plan. But we also got to realize where we are and the amount of work that we have to do on both sides of the ball. So in terms of allocating our resources, whether it's draft capital or our finances within the salary cap, you got to prioritize positions in need, and with those resources, depending on where you're allocating, what else can you get with those resources, and does it make sense?
John from YouTube has one here, Joe, and I'm going to get a little generic after I read his question. He says, what do you see at the inside linebacker and cornerback class this year? Maybe I'll just expand it and just say, how do you feel in general about this defensive crop compared to maybe the offensive crop that's coming out?
Yeah, it's a solid defensive crop. I think the outside backers in our scheme, I think it's a pretty deep class there. Rushers for 4-3 teams. I would say over the last few drafts, defensive tackle and inside linebackers are becoming more scarce for whatever reason. Defensive line maybe again because it's this 7-on-7 generation that the kids are playing up and they're skill guys. But inside linebacker and defensive tackle I would say is a little bit thin, and it has been the last few years. But otherwise, on the perimeter at corner, safeties, outside backers, I think there's some solid depth throughout the draft.
I think inside linebackers are interesting now because you want guys that can cover, or you're just going to blitz your linebackers. Then in passing situations you play safety. So
yeah.
Do you change your on-field philosophy simply based on the guys that are available and the guys you can bring in? How are those two things kind of interrelated in terms of how you use that position?
Yeah, again, you can only sign or draft, what's available to you in that cycle. So, yeah, but Wink did a really good job, with our staff identifying what position specifics and critical factor he wants the inside linebackers to have. So, you're right, there is a transition from a lot of these safeties, bigger safeties, will transition down to linebacker. Again, that's good in terms of pass coverage and being able to defend tight ends or those type of guys, but then you also got to be able to defend the run, and that's the difficult part for those guys. You got to be able to take on a 310-pound guard, but then you also got to be able to cover an athletic tight end. So those guys are hard to find.
We got at Mick tweeting over here. Does your draft philosophy alter based on where you're picking? You were obviously 2 picks in the top 7 last year. This year you're picking 25. Does your process change at all depending on where you're selecting?
No. The process will stay the same. The mindset will stay the same. Again, continue to add good football players. We're really only 13 months into this, and we still have a long way to go and a lot of work to do. So, again, I don't think you can go wrong taking good football players.
Another YouTuber from Jack, he wanted to know about, generically, what is it that you took from Buffalo that you were able to use most effectively last year, and what did you learn last year that you'll be able to advance yourself this year as a GM?
Yeah, I would say not just Buffalo, but when I was in Miami as well as a director of player personnel and then assistant GM in Buffalo, just if you look at some of the moves that we made, whether it was Tyree Phillips, Jack Anderson, Jason Pinnock, Nick McLeod, some of those waiver wire transactions that we made, it was about being patient. Some of the value signings, Jihad Ward, Richie James, like those are a lot of value guys that didn't cost us a lot on the cap because we didn't have a lot of money. So I think the biggest thing is being patient, understanding players will become available at different times of the year, and making sure you have a good process in place and those guys ranked in the right order, and you can still compete today and build for tomorrow. And I think that's what we showed last year with the roster. Again, whether it was waiver wire claims, getting guys off practice squad. Jared Davis, we did it week 16. He started 2 playoff games for us. So
amazing.
You're always trying to upgrade the roster in any way you can, but that would be the biggest thing that I implemented in Miami and Buffalo, and we were able to execute here.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got one more phone call here, Joe, I want to get to. Let's go to Tom in Connecticut. He wants to ask about the salary cap. Tom, go ahead.
Hi, Joe. Congratulations on us. I was just wondering, would you have saved more money by waiting until 2015 to release guys that released today?
Tom, we could barely hear you, man. I think he was asking about using a June 1st designation for cutting players and how that kind of helps the cap.
Were you asking about Galladay?
I think I might have heard that in the crackle.
Yeah, and we haven't decided yet on that. We let Galladay, Kenny and his representatives know that we are going to move on, and that move will be March 15th. So we still have a couple weeks to decide whether we want to take the cap hit this year or do it post June 1 and spread it out over 2 years. Again, it's a credit card. You're kicking it down the road, and you're going to have to pay the bill at some time. So we're going to try to find what works best for us as we're trying to build this thing. If it's to take the hit this year or post June 1 and spread it over 2 years.
Joe, thanks for being with us. Before we say goodbye, what's your number one priority as you move next few days, and kind of where are you on trying to achieve that as you're out here in Indy over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, really getting with the agents of our current guys that are UFAs. I'd like to retain some of our own. I'd like to have productive conversations. We already have with several of our players, and it was a special group we had last year. It was a special season for Daves and myself, our first year, and we'd like to retain some of those guys if we can, if it works out. But they've also earned the right to be free agents and test their market. So
far so good on that front.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, you never know with the negotiations. You go through a lot of pain before things get better. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Good stuff, Joe. Appreciate the time, man.
Yep.
Joe
Thanks,
Schoen,
Joe.
Giants General Manager. We'll be back with more Big Blue Kickoff Live right after this.